Hello and welcome to the second section of my Premiere workflow series. If you've not already seen the first section and the accompanying tips, then make sure you go and check them out as well. In this video, I'll be looking at the steps that go into making an actual edit, my workflow during these stages, and some of the useful tips along the way too. In my previous Premiere videos, we already covered some good ways on how to handle your files, importing your clips, and managing your bins. So now we're going to take a closer look at what to do after this first stage. For me, it's cutting down the interview or main narrative for your film. When you've shot something or when you're planning to shoot something, you should already have a good idea of what the final output will look like and the narrative content that will be in it. And as you already have an idea of this type of content, then it's just a case of going through your interview or scripted pieces, if that's what you're working on, to pull out the best bits for your final edit. So start off by creating a new timeline that is just for your interview footage. Drag the interview footage onto it and you're ready to start cutting it down. If you are on the shoot, then you'll have a good idea of what was captured, so how I like to work is by playing through at a slightly faster pace. You can control the playback speed using the L key, hit it twice and it plays back at double the speed, which is just about right for being able to hear what is being said. And if you want to slow it down, then just tap the J key. You can then use the C key to cut the clips into the sections that you want. How I work is that I cut out the individual sections, statements or responses as I go through the footage and add a basic text layer which will have a rough outline of either the question asked or the answer or statement given. I do this until I have an entire lot of interview cut downs into manageable chunks with their text layer above, and if need be I'll colour code my favourite selects too. Now this might look like overkill, but if you're thinking about your edit commercially, then it will help at a later stage in the project. So now let's go on to the next step. Now that your narrative is pretty much down, you want to start building your B-roll selects, and this is very much the same as the narrative selects. So depending on the film I'm putting together, I'll create a timeline based for my B-roll and section it out into different clips or bins based on their subject. So for this film, I'm going to create a new timeline, create a section for my bin labeled exteriors, drop all the clips in from that bin into that section of the timeline. Once all of my clips are in place from all of my bins, I'll scrub through and cut out any sections of the clips that are unusable until I have a single timeline with all of the best bits from each clip and all of the best clips from each bin. That way, when I'm putting the B-roll on my timeline, I'll know that I'm not missing anything important and won't need to keep searching through my clips individually. Again, doing this step does help out after you've done your main edit. When you first come to putting your edit together, there are some good steps to follow to make sure you're producing the best work possible. In the next section, we're going to go through a few of the steps that I feel are good practice to getting that edit completed. The first step is nailing that narrative. So we looked at how to cut down your interviews and making your best selects for your outputs. You'll now be in a position to start pulling those clips into your main timeline. As well as the narrative, you should also know where your finished film will be hosted, and this will dictate the length of your film. So create a new timeline as normal. I use a templated one so they're the same every time, so I'm just going to duplicate this one. Now go through your interview footage, pull out the strongest sections from your story, copy these clips and paste them onto your timeline. Remember to keep listening back through your main timeline to make sure your narrative makes sense. Once you're at a point where you have a good clear message and your project comes in under that predetermined time frame, you'll be able to start making it look good. And that's where the B-roll comes in. We've done the legwork of this, so now it's just grabbing those selected bits of B-roll and copying them onto the main timeline to support the narrative. At this stage, it should be quite roughly put together, and there may even be chunks of B-roll that have not been put in yet. To get the most out of your timeline, you can increase each line height. This is really useful for seeing the thumbnails of your B-roll clips. It also helps to be a little more accurate with changing audio levels and ducking your music. Once the main part of the B-roll is in, we can then look at tightening up the edit, and one of the best ways to do this is with music. Music is an important one, and sourcing it is actually pretty fun, well, mostly. There are loads of great music sites out there that you can get cheap, good music from, so do some research and find one that suits your project and your budget. When selecting music, remember to keep your narrative in mind, so don't just chuck in one track and be done with it. Do select 2 or 3 tracks that complement each other and it will support and lift the narrative in the important places. Once these are down, you can then start moving some of your clips and narrative around to fit in with the swells and dynamic changes of the music. Tied in with the music is sound effects. Again, you'll be able to find some good sites with cheap sound effect plans or one-off prices. You may even be able to find some stuff out there for free. But this is a time to be subtle. Little flourishes of ambient audio will go a long way to immersing your viewer into the film. And now that you've got the audio in place, you'll be able to go through and balance the audio. The main control of each clip is done with this little bar here. You can also increase the gain of a clip, just tap the G key and adjust, though I normally do this for the interview footage or audio that I've recorded myself. Use the pen tool here to change the levels of your music to duck it below your interview footage, allowing your interview to stand out against any other audio, and drop the levels of the sound effects to something you're happy with. Now that the main parts of your edit are put together, it's time to start with the finishing touches. The first step for this is titles. Here you want to keep things simple and effective. To set up a new title, go to File, New, then Legacy Title. This will bring up this new box for you, so name your title. Name it based on what the content will be. Check the settings are OK and hit OK. This brings up the title tool. Just click on the screen roughly where you want the title to appear. If this isn't right, you can change it later. Now type out the title text and just select the font, colour and size, and you're pretty much done. You should find your title has appeared in one of your bins, so grab it and place it over the section of your film that you want the title to appear. Now you can head over to the Effects tab and select Video Transitions, grab, drag and drop the Cross Dissolve transition under the Dissolve tab, pop one at the front and one at the end of your title, and now your title is ready to go. If you want to change the position, you can do this in the Effects Controls tab, or you can double click on the clip on your timeline to reopen the text window. So that's the interview, B-roll, music, sound effects and titles done. Now is the point where you can grade the footage. Grading in itself is quite complex, so there's a whole new section on that subject specifically. But so you're not left with an unfinished project, here's a quick look at the final edit steps for you. First thing you want to do is create a new adjustment layer. This gives you a global adjustment to everything beneath it in the timeline. So click the new item icon here and select adjustment layer. I usually work with 2 adjustment layers, one for colour correction and one for the final look of the film. But for this, we'll just work with the one. Drag this layer onto your timeline. You want to put it above the footage but below the titles, so you may need to move the titles up to the next layer. Head over to the Effects tab and search Lumetri. Typically, and for a reason that isn't logical, you have to scroll down to the very bottom for this. Grab it and drag it to your adjustment layer. Then head to the Effects Control tab and you have your Lumetri controls here. Much like photo editing, you can change all manner of elements to make your image more pleasing. So that's the basics of timelines and editing. I hope this has been useful, and don't forget to check out the rest of this series on Premiere with Wex Photo Video.